Okay, 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 okay. So now we are going to be continuing with the interpretation of a graph. Let me quickly check there. So we are given a statement, and that statement is followed by a graph that we will need to go through. So what I'm going to do is to read through that given statement, then go through that given graph and browse through the questions. I'm just hoping that with me browsing through those questions will guide you in terms of how you would answer questions related to the given statement and the graph itself. So let's see, what are they saying there? They are talking about Boutle. What does Boutle do? Okay, Boutle decides to graph her marks for English first additional language and for mathematical literacy on the same set of axes for 8 tests, 2 per school term. What? For 8 tests, 2 per school term. Okay, so look at the graph below and answer the questions that follow. You are given a key there for Maths Lit and English first additional language. Okay, maybe let's take a moment and have a look at that graph. Let's see. Just need to quickly check my calculator just in case if might be a need to use a calculator. So as a mathematician, honorable member, just make sure that at all the times when you are dealing with mathematics, you will always have your calculator ready, because without you having your calculator ready, then you might be missing some of the simple marks. So let's see, maybe let me just read through that statement for the last time while you are looking at that graph. Remember, for this problem, what I'm going to be doing, it is just to take you through the statement in the graph and browse through the questions, and we will see whether you can be able to derive correct answers based on what we are going to be talking about. Boutle decides to graph her marks for English first additional language and for mathematical literacy on the same set of axes, which means on the same vertical and horizontal line, or on the same axis. When they talk about the axis, they're meaning the x-axis and the vertical axis being the y-axis. So this honorable member being Boutle decides to graph her marks for English first additional language and more for mathematical literacy on the same set of axes for 8 tests. So let's try and count those doors to see if they are going to be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now it makes sense. For 8 tests, 2 per school term. Okay, that means there should be 2 tests for those 2 subjects, okay, per term, and it is 8 tests that are being plotted there. So look at the graph below and answer the questions that follow. We are given a key there where they are saying that is misleading, that is English first additional language. I wonder if that key is going to help us in any way, because it looks like this is a black and white or a grayish plot which is having those circles there. Okay, then it's fine. So you look at that, you will therefore realize that on the vertical axis, possibly those are the marks. By just looking at that graph, you can tell that on the vertical axis, that's where we are possibly having the marks. And on the horizontal axis, it should be the number of tests. as we counted there, and we counted them to be 8 tests. But when it comes to the vertical axis, we will therefore be able to see, and I think when necessary, we might be doing some estimations in terms of what percentage Boutle could have gotten by just looking at that graph on the vertical axis. So that means anything that has to do with the marks, you read it from the vertical axis. And then on the horizontal axis, it is the number of tests. Maybe by just going through those questions, we might be having an idea of exactly what we are dealing with over there. So number one, they say, what is Boutle's highest mark? Can you see the honorable member? So you need to be very, very, very careful there. Very, very careful there, the honorable member. So Boutle's highest mark, the highest mark, it will therefore have to come from the test where the honorable member got the highest point along the vertical axis. Just like if we're talking about the lowest mark, it would therefore be one on the lowest point. Just remember that the vertical line tells us more about the marks obtained, but the horizontal line tells us about the test number. So with you already being able to detect the highest mark, that means you can already know what test number that was. So you've got test number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then with you trying to determine that, you can already try to check what test number was it where you got the highest mark. And then you will just look at the number closer to that and you verify if it is above that number or below that number. And then you just estimate that mark that Boutle obtained. Trust me when I say I think there is an issue with that key. Definitely must be an issue with that key. I think let me try to do something that will make it easier to just be able to tell what is what. I will just shade that, just so that at least we've got the difference in those two graphs. And then what am I going to do here? Because here it's not clear in terms of which is which, but I'll just estimate there and do that. Something like that, and then do that there, and then do that there. Then let's see this one, which is a circle and dotted. Actually, let me just do it over that one. See, this one, which is a circle and dotted, it will be misled, and the one which is just a gray circle, it will be English first additional language. Don't know why, but I'm just suspecting that here they definitely made a mistake, because those two things, they must be different so that we know which line represents which subject, unless if maybe I'm the one who's just confusing them. So now they say, in which subject does Boutle generally score better marks? In which subject does Boutle generally score better marks. I think here it is just a matter of comparing the two graphs to say, remember, this one of the empty circles would be EFAL, being English First Additional Language. Just remember that. So that means the higher the points, the higher the marks, the better the performance on that particular subject. So now the question is, in which subject does Butle generally score better marks? So we are looking at the flying graph. Between those two graphs, which one is flying? Definitely the one which is flying, I think it should be one where we can confidently say the honorable member is generally scoring better marks. So does the graph show an overall improvement or an overall decline? What? Does the graph show an overall improvement or an overall decline? So that means the honorable member, what you will therefore have to do is to look at that graph where the honorable member was generally scoring better marks. Remember, you've got two subjects, Maths Lit and English First Additional Language. And it was clear that in one of those two, Butle was generally scoring better marks. But the question now is, in that particular subject, does the graph show an overall improvement or an overall decline? So if the graph is trending in an upward direction, I'm pretty much sure that it should be clear as to what we can assume regarding the performance. And if it is generally trending downwards, it means it is approaching zero. So downward trend would be approaching zero, and upward trend would be approaching 100%. I'm pretty much sure that with that said, you can be in a position where you are able to generally give a response to that question. Okay, let's see. What two interesting things can you tell about the marks? What two interesting things or things can you tell about the marks? Okay. It looks like, it definitely looks like you might need to have a look at those two graphs and try to compare an interesting trend. For example, you can see that maybe on test one, it looks like the marks were, the difference, or there was a big gap in terms of the performance between the two subjects in the beginning. Obviously, that would be test one. Maybe compare that with the last tests. Something of that nature, the honorable member, something that you can notice as a trend. You say, okay, it looks like over time that gap is getting narrower, or maybe something like the other one is generally showing a decline and the other one looks like generally it is showing an upward trend. Definitely, you know that you'll be writing many tests and then some you'll be getting higher marks, lower marks. But you can see that with the other one, we started from high and then generally trending in the downward direction, and then from there, it just doesn't improve as you compare from the first test. And then with the other one, you can see that, okay, we started poorly, and then we improved, and then we went down. And then from there, ever since, generally, we have been trending upward and closing that gap. So it's more like in the beginning, we can say you focused on one subject than the other, but over time and towards the end, you ended up balancing the two, which is what we are encouraging you to work towards, not finding a situation where the other one you got 80% and then the other one you got 20%. Rather, try to balance the two. So whatever interesting trend that you can notice there, you might as well just give your comment on that. So you need to be very, very careful in analyzing the given graphs and try to make sense of those to say, actually, in reality, you might find that there was that big gap and then you went home and they said, nope, you need to balance. We can't be having this much of a gap. Rather, work towards getting the marks which are in between and not having the other one way high up and then the other one a bit lower. Something of that nature, the honorable member. Okay, there is another question where they say, what did Butle score for each subject in test number 5? What did Butle score for each test, for each subject in test number 5? So that means you need to go to test number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you go up, 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 up. Then from there, you will realize that, okay, for the other subject, Butle scored a bit more. And then for the other subject, Butle got just a bit less, but they were close. So that will be for you to try and give an estimate in terms of what Butle could have scored for each subject. Okay, then the other question that you may be asked is something like, is this a continuous or a discrete graph and why? Pretty much sure that based on all the other lessons that we did previously, it was clearly indicated regarding what is a discrete graph and what is a continuous graph. And you will definitely need to give a reason for your selection on that one. That will definitely be based on your interpretation of that. Okay. Okay. So remember, you might be having multiple reasons to that, but just stick to one that you know that if I give this reason is sustainable because this is the reason that makes this type of a graph different from the other. Okay, so there is another question where they say, is this graph misleading in any way and why? Hmm. Hmm. So that means whichever answer that you go with, you will definitely need to give a valid reason over there. You will definitely need to give a valid reason there by firstly looking at that graph and trying to just make sense of it. You say, okay, why are we just not having the normal intervals to just say, let's see, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 90 and 100. And then in that way, it makes it clear in terms of, okay, where do we stand between 0 and 100? Because now you look at some of the other marks and you wonder, was it a pass or was it a fail or what's going on over there? Maybe let me not say much because might be leading you to a particular direction, but I would like for you to just try and make sense of this and see if you can come up with a reasonable answer, the honorable member. But I think for now, I will just leave it here. And I think I will give you a test that is either the same or related to this so that you can see how you would have answered this if it was given to you as a test. Because definitely this was extracted from one of the past papers and then it was given in this study guide as a problem to work on. So I think for now, I will just leave it here, the honorable member, and say until we meet. Okay.